Hello there and welcome to this Tools for Dummies Extra video. Today we are going to talk about Adobe Lightroom Classic. We are going to use this program to edit your photos. We're going to get started immediately with importing the photos that we want to edit. Within all of the Adobe programs, there are always multiple ways to do the same thing. So also for importing, you can either go to File, Import Photos and Video, or what I prefer, in your Finder or Explorer, search for the files you want to adjust, select them and drag them into Adobe Lightroom Classic. Make sure you are in the library mode, otherwise this won't work. Over here you can see the two pictures I want to edit, and I'm going to click on Import. In the library mode, you can do a couple of things like importing, categorizing, or selecting images. We are just going to use it for importing our photos. Now we're done importing, so let's go to the develop mode. You can switch between the modes by clicking on the word itself on the right top side of your screen. Now we are in the develop mode. And on the left side, you can see some presets. Those are basically filters for your photos, but we are going to use the right side. And over there, you can find quite some sliders to edit your photos. We're going to start with the top ones. Those are for adjusting the white balance of your image. In this case, the white balance is fine, but if a picture looks either too cold or too warm, you can use this slider, the temperature slider, to adjust that. If you double click on the slider, it will reset to its default value. Then we get to the tint slider, where you can adjust pictures that are either too green by sliding to the right or too purple by sliding it to the left. Also, this value is fine as it is, so I'm going to double click again to reset it. One thing that is good to know, everything that you do within Adobe Lightroom Classic is non-destructive. What that means is that everything you do over here will not affect the original image. So if you screw everything up like this, and let's do some more funky stuff. Yeah, like this. And in the end you think, I think I did something wrong. There's always this button on the right bottom side of your screen to get back to the original settings. So don't be scared to play around with the settings and get creative within Adobe Lightroom Classic. So now we get to the part where you can adjust the exposure of your image. First off, the main exposure slider. If you slide that to the left, it gets darker, slide it to the right, and it gets lighter. But you can also just adjust one specific part of the light of your image. For that, we're going to take a look at the histogram on the right top side of your screen. The histogram is basically a visual representation of your image. Even without taking a look at the picture itself, but just reading the histogram, you can already tell it has a lot of highlights in it. That's because on the right side you can see a giant peak. And if you hover over it, you can see a little bit lower that those are the highlights. Go a little bit more to the right, you can see those are the whites. Then the middle part is the exposure. Go to the left, those are the shadows. You can see that the shadows aren't really there. And all the way to the left you can find the darkest part of your image, and those are called the blacks. Each one of those has a corresponding slider. So since we have quite some highlights, we're going to get rid of some of them by sliding the highlight slider to the left. And as you can see already, there appears some detail in the sky. If I move it back and forth, you can see the difference. You can already see some clouds in there. So I'm going to also bring down the exposure a little. Going to bring the shadows a little bit up. Like that. And we're going to leave the whites. Now we're going to do the whites a little bit darker. And no, we're going to leave the blacks as they are. I skip one, the contrast. And we're going to add a little bit of contrast to our image. Just like that. So that's how you can adjust the exposure part of your image. And then we get to the last part of the basic adjustments. Those are called presence. The top one is a texture slider, and it's more or less the same as the clarity. In that the texture slider is a little bit more subtle than the clarity slider. Going to bump up the texture slider a little bit. And especially in the grass area, let's zoom in a little bit more, you can see how the texture slider affects that part. Going to double click to set it to 0 to show you the difference between the texture and the clarity. And as you can see, the clarity slider also adds a little bit of contrast to your image. Let's zoom out again. And looking at the overall image, I'm going to add a little bit of clarity, just like that. Then you get to the dehaze slider. You can use that, for example, with pictures shot when it's very foggy, and you can get some detail back from things that are in the fog by dragging it to the right. But I sometimes use it to get some more contrast in the sky, just like this. The last two sliders both affect the colors in your picture, but each in a different way. The saturation bumps up all the colors that are present in your picture. Vibrance is a little bit more subtle because the vibrance bumps up the colors except from the reds and the yellows. That's to prevent skin tones from being oversaturated. So you can basically make all the colors around your model more vibrant without getting the skin tones oversaturated. If we scroll down on the right side, you can see that there are way more options. But if I want to cover them all, this will be a tutorial of like 5 or 6 hours. So we are going to skip to some other options that you can use in Adobe Lightroom Classic. The first one is the crop tool. As you can see on the left top side of this image, there's a little dark area. We are going to get rid of that by cropping in on the image a little bit. You can grab a corner and bring it in. And since we're already here, we can reposition it a little so that it's exactly in the middle of the road. A little more to the right. Yes, there we are. When you're done, you can press the Enter key on your keyboard. And now we don't have that annoying dark corner anymore. Within the crop menu, you can also change the aspect ratio. If you click here, you can change it to 1:1, which is square if you want to have a square image, or to 16:9, which is the resolution for a video. I'm going to undo by pressing Command Z, if you're on Windows, Control Z, to get back to our original crop, and press Enter again. Within the crop tool, you also have an option to change the rotation, so change the angle of your image a little bit. You can use that if you shot a picture of a landscape and the horizon isn't perfectly straight. You can do it manually by moving this slider to the left or to the right, or you can use the straighten tool. With the straighten tool, you can draw a line over the horizon, and Lightroom will change the angle so that your horizon is perfectly straight. So the next option is to get rid of certain details in your image. So for example, if you want to get rid of those yellow poles next to the road, you can use the content aware remove to select them and let Lightroom Classic calculate what should have been there if those road signs weren't there. So we're going to make this a little bit bigger, and we're going to paint over the pole just like that. And we're going to do the same for the other side of the road. Just paint over it. And now they are gone. The other options do more or less the same. Content aware fill is based on AI, and the heal brush is for grabbing a certain part and reproducing that to a separate part in your image, and the clone stamp does more or less the same. So if you want to get rid of a certain piece of your image, you can use the content aware remove to do that. Next up is the red eye correction tool. You can use that for pictures. For example, if you've used a flash and someone has red eyes, you can use this tool by clicking on the red eye, and Lightroom is going to fix that by bringing it back to its natural color. And the last step has some nice options that you really can use, for example, pictures like this. And with this option, you can select a specific part and do some adjustments to that specific part. So for example, if we want to adjust the sky, we're going to click on sky, and Lightroom is going to calculate which part of your image is the sky, so you can just adjust that part. The red part is indicating where the mask is. And now if we move the exposure slider to the left, we're just going to make the sky darker. So you can do some real fun stuff with that. So if you want a sky that's really dark and angry, let's try to reproduce that a little. Scroll down. Let's bump up the clarity and do the haze. And what can we do more? Let's bring up some highlights in there. Make up the shadow a little. No, we're going to leave that. A little bit darker. And maybe a little bit more yeah, like that. So now with just a couple of adjustments, we have changed the mood of this whole picture by making the sky very angry and dark. So it's really nice that you can just get one specific part and make adjustments to that. For the other masks, we are going to go to our portrait, which we also imported. So I'm going to click on the portrait picture, and now we are going to click on subjects. So Lightroom is going to calculate what the subject is in this picture, and it's right. And now we can make adjustments just to her. We're going to make her a little bit darker because the flash was a little bit too bright. Like that. And let's zoom in first a little. So we're also going to bring down the highlights a little. Just like that. If you want to see a before and after, you can press the Y key on your keyboard to see a side by side. So on the left side you can see the before, and on the right side you can see the after. Pressing this Z key on your keyboard zooms out the picture so you can see everything again. So now we want to make another mask. We're going to click on this, and we're going to click on select background. So we want to adjust everything except for the subject. So we're going to click on that. Adobe Lightroom is going to make a new mask for me. And now we're going to make our background a little bit darker too. And let's get rid of some of the colors. Not too much, just like that. And maybe bump up the contrast to make it like a scary forest. Maybe make it a little bit foggy. Let's do that. Make it a little bit. Something like that. When you're done editing your pictures, you have to export them. Since all the things that you have done to the image are now just in Lightroom and not on the original. We are now going to select both pictures by holding the Shift key on our keyboard and click on the first image. And then right click and click on Export and Export. This will bring up the export window. And over here you can set the export location. So we are going to export to the same folder as the original. And we're going to put it in a subfolder called JPEG. And let's scroll down. You can choose to rename it. It's not a video, so we cannot do anything with that. Make sure it's a JPEG file. Normally it's on JPEG, so you don't have to change that. The quality, I'm not sure. I think standard it's like 75. I like to bump it up to 85, so the file is not too big, but also the quality stays nice. You can change the image size if you want. We're not going to do that. We want as big of an image as we can have. We're also not going to sharpen it because this image is already sharp. The problem with sharpening is that it can look a little bit too much quite quick. Then we have the data of the image, and you can add a watermark. And you can choose to do something after exporting, but we'll leave it like that. So when you're done adjusting the settings, you can click on Export. Now on the left top side, you can see Export to files, and then it's done. So when we go back to our folder, you can see there's a subfolder called JPEG, and it contains two images, the landscape and the portrait that we have just edited. And that's it for the basics of Adobe Lightroom Classic. Good luck editing your pictures.